The year is 1947. On the night of August 14th into August 15th, the Indian Independence Act came into force, and the sovereignty that Britain had held over the subcontinent for nearly 200 years lapsed. Two new dominions came into being that midnight, India and Pakistan. But the line that would separate them didn't exist as yet. The Boundary Commission, led by a British lawyer named Cyril Radcliffe, who had never set foot in India before that summer, had finished its work in secret by August 12th. And then, the Radcliffe Line wasn't published until August 17th, 2 days after independence, reportedly so that the chaos of the border wouldn't overshadow the celebrations in Delhi and Karachi. So for 2 days, an entire subcontinent was free, but nobody, not the millions of people about to be told which side of a new border their home would fall on, actually knew what was about to happen next. Hi guys, and welcome to Fandom Newbie. My name is Shruti, and today we're going to be talking about 7 books that talk about India's independence struggle. We've studied India's independence struggle in school. We've revered our heroes. We've learned all the dates. But today, I want to take you on the journey of India's independence struggle, not through the history that we've learned in textbooks, but rather through books, both nonfiction and fiction, that tell you a more emotional reality. These 7 books talk about the vision of India. It talks about the violence of the independence struggle. It talks about the politics that was involved, the cost of attaining freedom, and also the hope for the future. The Discovery of India is a semi-historical, semi-autobiographical book written by Jawaharlal Nehru, and he wrote it while he was in prison. He didn't have access to libraries where he could look up the history of India. He didn't really have access to any sort of resources because he was literally in jail when he wrote this book. And so when you read this book, I want you to remember that, because while this may not be a very accurate retelling of India's history, while some of the facts might be a little muddied, what this book actually tells you is Nehru's ideology for what India was in the past and what India could become. The main theme of this book was to remind Indians about our history, our culture, our civilizations that existed before the British came, and to unite India regardless of religion, regardless of caste, regardless of all the differences that divided us, to unite us against a common enemy, which was the British. The message was clear: fight the empire that's been occupying you. This book is really about Nehru's idea of India and his ideology of what it means to be Indian. If The Discovery of India gives you the idealism of our founding fathers, Indian Summer by Alex von Tunzelman brings you right back down to ground reality, and it tells you the messy politics behind the Indian independence struggle. This book is scathing. It is so sarcastic. It is so witty. And Alex von Tunzelman doesn't make anyone out to be heroes in this book. Every single person is ripped apart. You get into the messy lives of these messy politicians, and you realize just how difficult it was to decide how India and Pakistan would be created and how these two nations would be governed. This book doesn't just focus on the Indians, it also focuses on world politics and the foreign powers that had a stake in India and Pakistan's independence. It talks about the Cold War politics and how that affected the end of the British Empire. It talks about the economic reasons that led to the fall of the British Empire and eventually India's independence as well as Pakistan's. Like I mentioned, this book has absolutely no heroes. It just shows extremely messy, complicated, utterly human men and women who fought for and negotiated the independence of our country. Such an interesting read. One of the things that Indian Summer by Alex von Tunzelman touches upon is the violence of Indian partition. Now, that book focuses on the politics of it all and how the politicians of the countries dealt with it. But if you want to read about the emotional impact of partition, then you need to move to fiction. And the 2 books that I recommend are Train to Pakistan by Khushwant Singh and Independence by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. Train to Pakistan focuses on a fictional village in Punjab, and it talks about how the lives of these villagers are affected by decisions that are taken so many miles away in Delhi. There was one line from Train to Pakistan that really stayed with me, which was, "Freedom is for the educated people who fought for it. We were slaves of the English, now we will be slaves of the educated Indians or the Pakistanis." That line is so very devastating because it just shows that for so many people, specifically the poor people, independence didn't really feel like liberation. And quite honestly, partition cost them so, so much. So now, while Train to Pakistan focuses on how partition affected a village in Punjab, Independence by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni focuses on how it affected people at the family level. And it basically talks about how the lives of three sisters are completely changed because of partition. And this takes place on the West Bengal side. In this book, you do feel the jubilation of independence. This family rejoices when India is finally independent. But what they soon realize is, because of the horrors of partition and how their lives are completely changed, that independence came with a cost. And that cost for freedom is what is explored in this book in a very beautiful way. Moving from the very heartbreaking, devastating, emotional toll that partition had, we now move to looking at partition through something that's very tangible, through the history of objects. And this book is a nonfiction book, which is The Remnants of a Separation by Achal Malhotra. This book tells you the story of actual families who either moved from Pakistan to India or India to Pakistan. And it tells you their stories through the objects that they carried with them across the border. These objects carried a lot of emotional significance for them. It carried the memories of the houses that they left behind, the memories of the homes and the places and the cultures that they left behind. And not only does it talk about the memory of these objects, it talks about how they've built their lives in a new country, the situation in refugee camps, and their resilience to build a life for themselves in the country that they moved into. This is a very emotional book again, and I think it just talks about human resilience and bravery and the stubbornness of humans to rebuild their life after extremely devastating situations. Another book that talks about memory and also the after effects of partition across generations for the families that went through it is The Shadow Lines by Amitav Ghosh. This again talks about partition taking place on the Bengal side. This book has a character who is an old grandmother, and through her, Amitav Ghosh has explored the futility of borders. This grandmother cannot understand why a border exists because to her, the people living on either side of the border are very similar. They have the same culture, they have the same food habits, and they have the same just like normal habits in general. And she feels a strong affinity and she remembers her home on the other side of the border. And she just cannot comprehend why this split took place. This book is a very nice exploration of identity, of culture, and memory in general. And I think Amitav Ghosh's writing is very beautiful. And now we come to the theme of hope for the future, and that is through Wings of Fire by APJ Abdul Kalam. Abdul Kalam was born in Rameshwaram, a small town, in 1931, so pre-independence. And this book is basically his autobiography. It talks about him growing up in this town, his dreams, and also how he ended up basically pioneering India's science program, its space program, and also its missile program. And then eventually how he went on to become the president of our country. I think this book encapsulates the dreams that so many young people had, that regardless of them growing up at a time of violence and turmoil during India's independence, they still had that spark. They still had that hope. They still wanted to create a better nation. They still wanted to grow up in a country that was scientifically progressive, in a country that they could be proud of. And this hope and this inspiration is captured so well in this book. I feel like every young person should read this book just to be inspired and to understand the importance of education, especially. It's just one of those books that will inspire you to reach for the stars. So, yes, these were 7 books about the birth of our nation. And the story wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy, it was violent, it had its issues, but at the end of the day, there was always hope to build a better and a more progressive India. Let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these books and if you have any other recommendations of books to read about India's independence struggle. I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.